Hello and welcome to the Josh Leesman Experience. This is going to be episode 12, heading into week 4 of the LCS. I got Kien Lam here, who now is the most frequent guest. I was thinking about this at the gym this morning. I'm like, okay, I've had Kien now 3 times. I did Kobe twice, I had Mark twice, I've had Prawley twice, I've had Tyler from C9 fame twice, and now you 3 times. How does that feel?
It's an honor, thinking about it. But also, congratulations. 12 episodes is a lot. Just thinking about it.
I'm trucking through.
Pumping some stuff out. 12 episodes.
Yeah, a third of the way into the season. And you had an idea that I liked in coming up with somewhat more unconventional 3-week through the season awards since we're doing this. And I liked it. So what are the awards you came up with? You gave me a few that I named, but since they're your awards, I want you to intro them.
So we have this is an homage to the Oscars who just passed. So yeah. I would like to introduce the 4 categories this week. First one will be the Bengi Award for Best Supporting Actor. Mm-hmm. And this is essentially the second most valuable player on the team.
They can't be the best player on a team.
Yeah, they can't be the best player on the team. Mm-hmm. So it's the most important second best player on a team. Yeah. The second award is the SilSol Award. That's a throwback for those of you who've been playing League of Legends for a while. For most successful player who you don't really understand why they're doing well. Yeah,
SilSol was a solo queue player who did Heal Ignite all the time, but was like constantly high challenger. Yeah. And everyone in high challenger was like, I hate, SilSol's terrible. Yet for some reason his MMR never dropped, so he was clearly doing something right, but no one knew what.
He was always very high in the ladder. I loved watching that, and I wish there would if we could do a where are they now? There are so many people from solo queue early in the days that I'm just kind of curious what happened to X or Y or Z, and he's I think right at the top for most of us is what happened to SilSol. The third award is the Jin Air Teddy Award for Best Performing Player on a Losing Team. So you can only pick a player from somebody that's sub 500, no 500 teams. And then the final award, of course, is just best actor, which is your current season MVP. We're a third of the way.
Sweet. Okay, so we're starting off with the Bengi Award for Best Supporting Actor, and I had an individual thing because I really wanted it to match the name of Bengi, where no one would ever say he's the most valuable player of the team. So this isn't one of those. I don't know, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, where one night Paul George pops off or something, even though 85% of the people say Kawhi's better than George.
It's definitely Kawhi.
Yeah. But so this one I'm actually going to give to Nisqy.
Nisqy.
Because while he's really good and he might win top mid laner this year, I think when you're talking about the most influential thing for C9, a lot of people are saying, oh, it's Sven for having the amazing KDA, or it's the $1.5 million Vulcan buyout, or it's Blaber. Almost everyone gets put above him, but I feel right now, Nisqy, with how much he's roaming and how he's actually pulled out a really large champion pool with Morgana and Pantheon, I wanted to give it to him. What was yours?
So I think that's a good pick. Before I jump to mine, I'm kind of curious with Nisqy. I was thinking about this. And you're saying that he could win mid lane into the split.
Does that disqualify him?
No. Because I'm thinking about it some more, and I think that could be true. But I could also I could see it flipping the entire way completely. Let's say, because right now I think Jensen and Bjergsen are almost always going to be on that list, right? Just call it popularity, whatever you want to call it. They're always going to be on that list, especially if both of those teams end up doing well, which I think they will. Yeah. I'm curious. Let's say that Dignitas or FlyQuest pop off and make a run, and let's say they get 10, 11 wins.
Then we're talking
Power of Evil and Froggen are in the conversation. Is Nisqy the one that gets completely bopped out of that mid laner list?
If C9 falters, which I don't necessarily think will happen, and doesn't finish top of the standings, then yes. But Nisqy has had recognition before. Even in Summer Split of 2019, he was actually extremely close to first team. I think Jensen beat him by a couple of votes. Yeah. So I think there's already the pattern of people kind of recognizing this guy's really good. So because of the performance of Froggen and PoE and the story behind them, yeah, maybe, but only if C9 falters.
Okay. But I think that's actually good for you. For me, I think personally, I'm going to pick Dardoch.
I had him. I turned my screen around. I had Nisqy, Dardoch.
Yeah.
I think too many people are going to say Dardoch is the best player on TSM right now, but keep going.
Dardoch's the hot, that's the Academy choice. That's the one where going in every, he won the last award show before this. People were expecting Dardoch to get it. I'm going to give it to Dardoch. Because when I look at Cloud9, I actually don't know who. I couldn't even tell you who their MVP is. So if I can't tell you who their most important player is, it's hard for me to tell you
who their second most important.
It's like all 5 of them feel like they're contributing almost equal. Like, I don't. It's probably not equal. It very rarely is, but they're all contributing so well that I feel like you can talk to anybody and they can tell you this is my current MVP, and I would have a hard time telling you you're just flat out wrong. Versus on TSM, I feel like Dardoch has immediately been the game changer for them, but not in a way that's like, oh, he's definitely like their best player. Because there have been games where like he'll do something and I'm like, ooh, Dardoch, that was kind of a questionable thing you did there.
Yeah.
Whereas Bjergsen just had another deathless week, and I feel like is clearly the best player and always has been the best player. He's like TSM will always play around Bjergsen. He is always going to be their MVP.
Yeah.
And so like, and I think TSM for a long time has always been looking for a jungler. They've been literally looking for the Bengi.
Yeah, and that is closer to the Faker Bengi analogy. So I'll buy in.
So
I'll buy into that one.
Second award, we gotta get some drum rolls. SilSol award for most successful player who don't really understand why they're doing well. Jatt?
Eika. He's 4-2. And it depends on what you mean by doing well. Because when SilSol was winning games, no one ever said SilSol carried. They'd point to all the things that he was doing as they were and I was looking at some of his stats earlier, and it's like he's not that bad in lane statistically. His CS per minute is really low, near the bottom of the league. He's less than 50% kill participation. Everyone kind of just like points to these moments in the games where, oh, he messed this up and he messed that up and his Azir game was so bad and he was nearly solo killed by Crown. And then the Nexus died from the other team. So he was winning. So that's one of those things, because I still don't really understand why Eika is winning games, but that was kind of the thing with SilSol. So that's why I threw Eika in there. What do you think?
I agree. I mean, that's definitely my pick. It's like it's.
Oh yeah, same one.
Yeah, if I could pick, I also don't want to pick a player. I just want to pick, like, I think Eika kind of represents IMT as a whole. When I'm thinking, like, they're 4-2. Like, we talked about this last week. It was like, they could. I
actually called the 2-0 last week.
You said it looks like they could be 4-2, and I was like, I could see that happening. And here they are at 4-2 with another crazy win over CLG. Just the way that one ended, and I'm sitting here like, okay, I don't know if I could tell you a single standout play necessarily that Eika has made this split. I can think of a few times where he's been caught out. I don't think he's necessarily been awful.
Yeah.
But it's very perplexing to me that this team is 4. This is one of those things we talked about even earlier in the season. Like, oh, they could just they're just going to randomly win games, and we're not really sure why. But it's, and of course I talk about it a little bit later. But it's like this is a team that just has very good understanding of win conditions, and it's just interesting to see how long this can keep going. Because eventually, if they just keep winning, we have to sit here and say like, throw out whatever analysis you all have out the window. It's like you've been analyzing this game professionally for years now.
Yeah. And
if they keep winning games, I don't know if you're going to come up with a good answer.
I caught up with Zabutin before their game against CLG, where they, were down a Dragon Soul and lost the Baron, but then just killed the Nexus. Before that game, he was like, yeah, it's good for my theory of just accumulating smart players. Like, just get a bunch of smart people on the game, and that's going to be enough to win. So that is an explanation I can buy. Right? Hey, yeah, my team is just smarter than the other teams. And, like, we're good enough mechanically. Like, we're not going to win the game because we solo killed you 6 times or because we're dominating lanes. But, like, there's just a bunch of experienced players.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I saw Soaz tweet the other day he was going to become or I think literally last night he was going to become a pro at Project A, and then somebody responded to him like, "Oh, you suck" or whatever, and he said, or he's like, "Oh, does this mean you're not going to be a pro LCS player?" And he said, "No," and he's like, "No, I think you can still win the NALCS while being a Project A pro." I mean, he's living up to it. I thought
the attitude this team is going to develop throughout the year, I don't know if I can take it.
It is the weirdest ego. It's almost earned too. So it's hard for me to.
I can't fight it.
It's great. My runner up for this award though is not a human. It's not a team. It's Senna. I don't like everything. I look at this champion. It's designed to be a support. Like Double F mentioned, doesn't have good wave clear. I don't think it has that great like sustained damage over time. So it's pretty bad at taking objectives, which are pretty key. I'm a kid. I'm like you don't see it picked up in Korea at all. I'm kind of curious when LPL comes back, like how much it'll be played in the LPL going forward. And of course, Double If being 0-4 on it, I think kind of reinforces. Like a lot of people are calling the Senna pick the new NA Jace, if you will.
Sure.
And I'm kind of curious. Do you think Senna is a good?
Yeah. I've played a lot of Senna, and I think it is a good pick. In the next patch that we're moving into this week, the soul drop for AD carry Senna is much lower, so some of the range will be decreased, and it'll be a worse pick than it was in previous weeks. But to answer some of the questions, like, I think one of the reasons it's good in pro is when you actually change your comp or your play style around the strengths and weaknesses of Senna, the strengths are so high. So it's like the kind of 2-hit pattern of auto Q that does some absurd amount of their max health each time. It's like, it's not good sustained damage, but it's actually really high. Like I'm looking at this person and we're killing this person, and then we're moving on to the next person and we're killing that person with the team around them. So you look at post-game damage numbers, like, or even just overall damage percentages, even though you don't have tank shred, like the damage a Senna does is comparable to other top marksmen almost every game. And then you also get a line heal. Like I am still kind of shocked that a line heal got put back into the game after Season 1 Ezreal W got taken out of the game.
I miss that. Because
at a high level, the amount of power that gave for objectives, for sustained pushes, was like absurd.
Yeah.
And then we're like, oh yeah, by the way, Senna can do it. Just like all line up there and just whoop, the whole team healed. And that level of efficiency is what you can really play around, is the sustained fights. So I think that we'll probably still see it even as an AD carry pick, even with the soul drop chances. And if tank support, like Stoneplate thing, ever gets changed, then maybe we'll see it in support. But right now, I think it's just melee supports. Anyway, that's a long-winded response on Senna, but I think it's good champ.
Makes sense. Third award then, moving forward, is the Jin Air Teddy Award for best performing player on a losing team.
I think we're going to have the same one for this, but I'm not sure.
I'm pretty confident we're going to have the same one for this.
Closer.
It's Closer.
Yeah, he's been so good.
Look, Closer's been very good.
Yeah, and this is one of those things where I don't want to completely overhype Closer, because we never know exactly what is happening behind the scenes.
Yes.
Because it can be a situation where a jungler or a player on a bad team enters a mode where they're just doing everything for themselves and not really helping the team. I think this is what a lot of people accuse Froggen for doing in the past on some of those bad teams. Like, you can play in a way that makes you look good but doesn't lead to victory. I don't think that's what Closer's doing. In this instance, I actually do think he's just performing really well, and the team is losing some close games. So I think it's a really promising sign, but I just wanted to couch that as one of those, like, when evaluating good players on losing teams.
I mean, they're winning the early game a lot, which I think is a good sign. It's like Golden Guardians isn't losing because they're just getting blasted in lane. They're losing because they just have bad mid-late game macro, and I think that's a good sign for a jungler. It's like he knows how to, and of course the bad mid-late game macro could also be his fault. Yeah, that's hard for us to say, but it kind of reminds me of when you bring your point up with like a shining player on a bad team who might be playing for themselves. Reminds me of the Mike Young hype that came in after Phoenix won.
Yeah.
I think it's a pretty similar comparison. I think situationally it's similar, but I do think Closer's playing better. Like, I personally didn't really buy into the Mike Young hype that much. That particular split, I remember he played a lot of Nidalee, which is a very like me
solo queue-ish
jungler
carry pick.
Yeah, and I don't feel like Closer is doing that.
Yeah,
I think
he's not even picking the carry stuff. He's just picking normal junglers and looking exceptional.
And I think that, and I also think the difference is that Closer also has like actual, like, he's not a rookie. He has played. He was the MVP in the TCL. This is not just a random player that they picked up from solo queue. This is a player with professional experience. He's proven himself to be very good in a league that was, like, honestly not much worse than NA when it comes to on like an international performance level. And I think that bodes well for Golden Guardians to have like a really bright spot going forward. Like, this is not a completely awful team.
Yeah, I like the feature that him and Broken Blade had before last week's, I think it was the second TSM game. Just like the friendship that they'd developed before, and how Broken Blade coming to the LCS like motivated maybe a lot of other TCL players to think they can make the jump into the LCS. And Broken Blade proved it, and Closer has been proving it so far. So
the question, though, is I did call this the Jin Air Teddy Award, and Teddy was very good at hard carrying. Like, there were games where he would hard carry that team over the finish line. Part of that is because he's playing the one role that is, if you hit the end game, you can hard carry. I'm curious, is there a world in which a jungler can perform at that level where they are putting their team on their back. 'Cause we've seen games, the most recent example I saw was in a game where Blaber was 6-1-2, I believe.
Okay.
And he was level 13 as Licorice was level 18. Is this a world in which a jungler can be the hard carry?
I don't know, but we'll see because jungle experience is buffed on 10-3.
That's very good.
So closer kind of the Keith factor in that game was amazing, but closer actually closed it with the kick on a double lift in the base to end the game. And I'm looking forward this week to see how quickly teams are willing to invest more in a jungler, because we know they can make a lot of early game stuff happen. And like, I'm waiting for Olaf to come back as a pick, because I think with the slightly increased experience, you might be able to run some games as Olaf. Like, what I mean by run some games is play through the jungler and continue to play through the jungler all the way to victory. We saw one game of this in the LCK on the old patch because they did Olaf. They had a Yuumi bot lane.
Yeah, I remember this game.
And they had the Ornn. So they upgraded the cleaver on the Olaf. He was actually a Cinderhulk Olaf, which normally you do Warrior. But by endgame, he was just steamrolling.
It was really funny to watch.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know if like it's a little slow and it's hard to learn with Yuumi right now, but I want to see that comp.
I mean, it was a jungler's dream. I'm just thinking about like there was that famous game where Levi hit like Nocturne ult at like 450 or something crazy like that way back at Worlds. So there have been a few teams that have tried playing around on jungle or hypercarry. I remember at Worlds last year, going into semis or finals even, I was talking to Yankos, and he told me that the biggest thing that G2 learned over Worlds was they had been playing a lot in which they would ask their jungler to come support the lanes. And so it was a lot of like jungler would support the lanes. And then they pivoted once they saw how other teams were playing, which was the laners should play around the jungler. And that simple mindset of like asking the jungler, what does the jungler need? And so the laners being like, okay, what do you need right now, Yankos? Instead of the jungler asking the laners what they particularly need, I felt like that made a lot of sense, just thinking philosophically about how the early game is supposed to be run. And I'm wondering, is this the word? Like, if your best player is your jungler, you need to commit harder. I mean, at a certain point, you just have to play to what pieces are available to you. Like, even in an ideal world where your AD or your mid is the carry, if you don't have the players that can do that, you gotta kind of pivot styles, right? Yeah,
I think you do. I think last patch it was actually a little bit too hard to do something like that. And this is from like personal experience. I'm the type of player who takes oftentimes just more resources than I should as a jungler, because I like to just play through me. But the supportive style, objective focused jungle is like the only way I felt like I could win last patch. So in the LCS that was true, but I'll need more reps on like hard farming to see how it goes. I totally agree. In the past, when you have a good jungler, there's been tons of patches where it's totally viable to make your jungler the carry. Like it's the whole game, if you just boil it down, is like it's resource management and maximizing your best players and your best win conditions. And like junglers are the most powerful person on the map at 230 or 240 because they're level 3 with double buffs if you do that stuff right. So if the game reaches a point where you can maintain that lead throughout the game and your jungler's your best player, then yeah, you can do that. There's already actually a lot of like challenger solo queue in Korea right now is approaching like 6 jungle bans a game. So, and what those junglers are doing is like they'll be the most powerful level 3, they'll go gank, they'll tax the wave. Then their camps are back up. They'll clear it, they'll tax a wave, right? And you can reach this point where you're getting more gold than anyone else on the map, in which case your jungler should carry because that's like the most efficient way to play the game. It's a weird mental thing though, because like your laners actually have to gank for your jungler in a sense. Like, oh yeah, I'm prepping the wave for the jungler to come take it. But that can work. I want to see it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It is tax season after all. So, of course, jumping into the final award then, I didn't come up with a clever MVP. Maybe we'll call it the Faker Award for most or who has won the most MVPs? And is it?
Yeah, I mean, for LCS, it's the Bjergsen Award, but that feels like super biased when Bjergsen's still in the league.
It is super biased. We'll call it the Faker Award for the best actor or most valuable player, third of the way through the split. What do you got, Jatt?
I think in my history of giving away like half season or 1/3 season MVPs, I've like never named the end of season MVP, because the purpose isn't to predict the MVP by the end of the season. It's to predict the most valuable player between the first 3 weeks. And like, oftentimes, unless there's one individual hard carrying a team to second or third, the MVP ends up going to the best player on the best team.
Yeah.
So that very quickly narrows it down to Cloud9.
Yes.
And then I'm actually deciding between Sven and Blaber. And I think Blaber managing to lead the league in kills while filling in for Sven and reining his game back, or for Svenskeren.
Yes.
And reining his game back enough to still have very solid mid and late games as a team. There's so much, like, it's really difficult to assign an MVP to Cloud9 right now because I actually do feel like it is kind of like, they even talked about this in their culture video, like 5 leaders on the team. So they're all kind of contributing. But I would say the MasterCard Player of the Week from week 3, Blaber, is my 1/3 of the way MVP.
I agree with you. My definition's probably similar to you. I agree. It's best player and the best team. For me, I'd push this a little step further, and I'd say it's Blaber because he's playing a role that I find more impactful than Sven is right now. I think Sven is performing the best in his particular role. I just feel like jungler is more impactful than AD at the moment, especially with the way Cloud9 is playing. They haven't really needed Sven to 1v5 or whatever because they've been smashing the early game so hard. And when you smash the early game that hard, that's very rarely because your AD carry is just dunking on people. That's just not how that role works in lane. And so Blaber getting all these advantages for his team makes him pretty clearly the MVP for me on this team. And there's a couple other people I would take over Sven as well. Not because I think Sven's playing bad, but because I don't think he's playing a role that is contributing to their wins as much as jungler or mid or even top.
Right. And we'll see how things evolve and like what the champion pool ends up doing. But yeah, I agree. He's playing like super solid, amazing League of Legends.
My dark horse MVP candidate for this is actually Broxah, who hasn't played a single game, but because he hasn't played a game, I think Liquid has lost 4 games that they could have won if he was in there. It reminds me of a season. I remember arguing with a buddy once. There was a season where Peyton Manning was just out the entire year. Yeah. And I remember joking with him. I was like, I think you could give Peyton Manning the MVP, and it would still make sense. Just from the sheer fact, like in terms of, if you think about it in terms of like how much impact they're causing to a team's overall win-loss record, and him being out is contributing a lot to that. So that's my roundabout way of hyping Broxah up.
You say that kind of sarcastically, but that ends up being a real play in a lot of NBA MVP votes. Yeah. Like when a team is really jiving, and then I remembered this the most with Steve Nash. I think it was his second MVP, where he missed a series of games and the team just went completely into the tank. And then all the pundits are like, look at what happens without Steve Nash. It's all him. Where like there are definitely other factors at play, but that ends up being a big one. I don't think Broxah will. Okay, so in terms of 10 thoughts this week, everyone should check out Kien's article. It's on lolesports.com.
I think you have.
It's on your Twitter, which is Mean Mr. Kien.
Twitter. I think if you take all lolesports.com, it redirects to the website.
Yeah, it usually ends up also getting teased on like the Lolesports Instagram and Twitters and stuff. Because we've already kind of touched on some of the teams, we're not necessarily going to do a 1 through 10 through the 10 thoughts. For C9, we are 100% on board. We give them like half of our awards just now.
They're extremely good.
They're just so extremely good. We don't need to go in on that. I talked a lot about it with Prawley in another episode as well. I'm going to skip and then double back because I want to go into more of this Team Liquid Broxah stuff. You had them as your 9th thought when you're talking about Broxah Smash.
It's alphabetical.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. The whole. The list.
It's record and then alphabetical.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So they're not actually the 9th team. They just happen to be 9th on this list. It's their fault for being a T letter as their start.
They touched on this a little bit in the dive as well, but I find it so fascinating how bad Double Lift looks, how bad Impact was against Someday, how bad Jensen's Rumble was, and how Schernfire was the scapegoat, but it's turned into so much more than that. And it's literally 3 weeks into the spring split. So time for panic is obviously not there. And I really want to see, as this season progresses, how Broxah's presence on the team can improve the rest of Team Liquid. Because we talked about this a lot before the season. Winning 4 titles in a row is really hard. And every subsequent title, it gets harder and harder to motivate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're put in this position where they're in this, there was a really good term that the C9 psychologist said, but it's something like an end game mindset. Like when you're only looking at the end goal, that can actually be really troublesome for your day-to-day and your process, because ultimately, like, the process is where champions are made and they're just recognized during the championship. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think is really hurting TL right now, where they're thinking like, oh yeah, with Broxah, we're going to do stuff at Worlds. But like, dude, we're third of the way through the spring split and y'all are awful.
Yep.
Like, you haven't been practicing at a high level. I know you're trying to avoid burnout, and probably internally they felt stuck because they knew this wasn't going to be the team, and the synergy and work that they would do with Schernfire would feel like they'd have to double back on it again with Broxah, so they're in that limbo. My hope is that they kind of immediately find motivation, because if they stay in this spring split malaise, it's going to really hurt them down the road, is my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to hurt just from a morale perspective, just in terms of like you have to build up the muscle memory of, like, winning is a muscle memory at a certain point in terms of knowing what, like, and IMT being a great example of just knowing how to win. And Liquid hasn't been able to do that on this roster. I'm of the opinion, like, I don't honestly care that they're 2-4. I don't, like, I'm of the opinion where we just throw everything out the window. The first 3 weeks does not matter to me at all when it comes to assessing what we've seen from TL. I agree with all your takes in terms of, I think it's a bad sign that they look lackadaisical. Whether they find motivation or not going forward, I think is, like, really the thing that's good. Like, if this continues for a couple more weeks, I think we're in trouble. But even, like, this coming weekend, I don't know, like, Broxah, I think, said he doesn't land until tomorrow. So let's say he plays this week. He's going to be jet lagged, like, super badly coming in. They haven't had any reps together. I don't expect them to take that long to gel, because I feel like at a certain point, you're so good at this game and you've been playing for so long that you should all generally have a good understanding of how to, like, G2 being a great example. You have 5 guys who know how to play the game. There isn't really much, quote unquote, gelling to be done, in my opinion. So I'm kind of curious to see what, like, I expect them to do well almost immediately. If they struggle out of the gate, I think then we can start worrying a little bit. But this is a team, to me, that, let's say they just continue this lackluster spring split, and let's say they miss MSI. I'm still not that worried about it. I think MSI is important, probably more so than a lot of people. Like, I think that's, like, I think winning MSI is great. Like, having a good, like, I thought TL making finals was, like, a really great performance. We like to knock them down because they didn't make it at Worlds, but it's one of 2 international events. I feel like you should be celebrated for success on MSI.
Like, there's 4 tournaments that you play in: Spring Split, MSI, Summer Split, and Worlds. If you sack Spring Split, you're sacking MSI, which is like half of the year.
Which sucks. And I definitely, like, I think that feels bad for sure. Liquid probably has their eyes set too hard on the end, but I think just from the way that their careers have been judged, they know at this point that it doesn't matter what happens in spring. It also doesn't matter what happens at MSI. As long as you do well at Worlds, and as long as they can get it together by Worlds, I think it's fine. I think the first 3 weeks are a wash. I'm not worried about this team. Like, I was talking to a friend recently who we were talking, is Cloud9 the odds-on favorite to win spring? I'm personally, if I was a betting man, I would still bet on Liquid to win the spring split.
Ooh. Really quick, we didn't touch on this last time where we talked about spring. Like, there is a new spring playoffs format that I'm sure we're going to talk about more, but I'll give you, like, the very quick TLDR is the difference between 4th and 5th seed is more popular than it's ever been, because the first round, first place 4, third place 2nd, and the losers of those games will then play 6 and 5. So if you're top 4, you basically get double elim. Until the actual final, where your advantage was you didn't have to play as many best of 5s to get there. But yeah, so you can find that, just like Google 2020 LCS format, and it's in that article. But they've already lost 4. If Broxah doesn't, because the team is just not playing at a high level right now. If they don't win this week and they lose 2 more in a row, like, then they're in that 2-6 scary territory where they're looking for the 5th or 6th seed, and then have to make a harder run through the playoffs. But we'll see.
That might be better to be the 5th seed, honestly. To me, like, when you think about teams like at Worlds, when they have to play through the play-in.
The motivation.
Well, there's motivation. They get the play-in. They get the reps on stage. If you're a team that just wants more reps on stage, play the extra set.
Yeah, your number 8 in your 10 thoughts was Keith McGrief, Golden Guardians. Lol, imagine griefing your team. Okay, double if go play Senna. But then you talk about the satisfaction probably of that 2v2 kill. Like, what a better way for Keith to... I felt so happy watching it because like,
great.
I'm part of the broadcast. I'm part of the reason that people are pointing fingers at Keith because we've all talked about how, like, hey, Golden Guardians hasn't given Keith enough time to develop, but at the same time, like, you still got to perform on stage, and then he's had these, like, awful KDAs, and then I was talking with Golden Glue right after the game, and he's like, it was so nice that our bot lane gave us a win condition, like 2 minutes into the game, and how freeing that was on stage. I was just happy for Keith and FBI to get that kill against Doublelift of all people.
I think a lot of us were really happy. I remember being on Twitter and almost immediately, I think everybody started like reverse memeing. So we wanted to see Keith. Like, I don't think anybody wanted to see him the 1 in 22. Keith, like, none of us expected him to do well, but it just feels good to see that. I think a lot of us, you especially, have been on the receiving end of a lot of vitriol from fans for things that sometimes are maybe a little justified.
Sure.
Sometimes probably completely unjustified. And I think you can kind of relate to that sentiment a little bit. When you see him getting flamed, there's a lot of empathy, I think, for this. And I think for us, I'm kind of curious, like, this is something I've been thinking about is, like, to you, what is the line between, like, this criticism? Like, how much, like, because Keith undoubtedly deserved some criticism. Do you feel like the community as a whole maybe overstepped the line? Like, how do we draw that distinction? Like, because at a certain point, you're like, oh, people are calling for him to be replaced, which I'm not, like, that's not the wildest piece of criticism, and that makes sense to me. Even if we have justifications for why he's doing bad, like, what is the line for this?
That's a great question, and it's so hard for me to answer because you're constantly trying to, like, so it depends. From a community perspective, it's one question. From like a broadcaster perspective, it's like even another question. Yeah. And that line is like blurrier by the day because I can never really sit here and say like, yeah, you shouldn't make jokes and memes because that's what the whole thing is like built on. Yeah. And I didn't feel like people were necessarily making like personal attacks, which would have been over the line. Like they started talking about like his appearance or something or his personality, like those would have been a little bit too much. But like the Keith McGrief is like right on the line, right? It's something where when you see it on Twitter for the first time, you chuckle and you go, oh, darn, that was clever. Ooh, I really hope Keith doesn't see that, right? Like it's right in that, it's right in that bar. And at one point it's really entertaining, the other point's not. So to like answer your question, it depends on the individual and whether they, like what type of relationship do they want to have with their fans and those players. Yeah. I'd actually say this was, the general conversation with Keith was pretty appropriate because most of the time, while people were flaming for poor results, they were also elaborating. They were mentioning a lot of the other factors that led to this eventually poor result. So this one was okay. Yeah, I mean, so I've seen you and the casting team as a whole, any talent that's like super public, I've seen you get flamed for being too nice to players. I've also seen you get flamed for being too mean to players. Yeah. So when you're like in your back room and you guys, let's say you're having like a caster meeting or like a talent meeting, how do you come to terms with that? Like, is there like, when you're trying to portray these players, like what is your approach to that kind of problem? Yeah, so I can talk about me individually because I think every caster can actually have their own approach and it's like all valid. Yeah. Like it is a valid approach to be, you know, edgier and flame more because you do need a way to have your voice stick out. I try to just be as fair as possible while still being able to give my own opinion. I think like 4 or 5 years ago, I was overly concerned with being fair with everything I said and ended up not giving my more true opinion on a lot of stuff. And now I'm much more about trying to just be honest about the way I feel. But yeah, I usually try to avoid the like memey or really flamey language or like, oh yeah, he should be kicked. Like I don't try and attack someone's livelihood as much as some others do. That makes sense. Yeah. That's definitely an interesting, something I think about a lot. No, you have to think about it like constantly when you're creating content. But that was the TL Golden Guardians game. The Immortals team I felt like needed just like a tiny bit more elaboration because I look at their their opponents this week. And last week I said, hey, this team is going to go 4-2. Now they play TL and EG. That TL game, which is the first game of the weekend on Saturday, is just like fascinating to me because it's ex-Smithy against the like 3 days on TL Broxah.
Yeah.
Like, what if Immortals is 6-2?
I mean, it could happen.
That's the biggest question. Like,
I mean, if they're 6-2,
second.
So this was kind of my conundrum thinking about it this week is, and let's start with their win against CLG, because I think your answer to this will kind of answer the rest of my pondering. Is the way they won that game was essentially they were jockeying around Baron, and then suddenly at one point, if you were watching the minimap, Altec just keeps pushing down mid lane.
Yeah.
You know, there's a whole meme about get mid prio. Altec got a lot of mid prio, just rubbing it down there, and then suddenly they start fighting. Then you see Azir just move to the side, and you see him teleport. And at that point, you're like, wait a second, is this happening again?
Yeah.
And of course, the rest of the team just stops all the backs, and CLG is just kind of caught in the middle of nowhere. Immortals wins off of this push. I'm going to ask for both your experience as a spectator and as an analyst.
Yeah.
Did you love how they won that game, or did you hate it?
Oh, geez. Okay. My original reaction was no. Like, the word I said is no. Like, I'm like, no, they're not winning like this. No. But there was like a tinge of fun in it, so it's definitely a mix.
Yeah.
It's closer to hate than love, for sure.
Yeah.
Because I didn't even feel like they necessarily did like a huge amount of setup or like an incredibly clever play.
No, it was random. Like they weren't trying to win.
CLG just gave up mid priority when going for Baron, even though they were the stronger team who never should have given up mid priority. So there are different ways where a team could be really clever with like the wards or the TPs they place. This was a little bit of like brute force backdooring, if that makes sense. And a really good play by X-Smithy to interrupt the teleport down the stretch. And to double back a little bit on like how Immortals is actually winning, I would want to shout out Altec as an individual player who's actually performing at a pretty high level.
Yep.
I had this conversation a little bit with some of the other casters, and I didn't necessarily think it's worth debating in like a 5-minute analyst desk segment or something yet, but actually ranking Altec amongst LCS AD carries right now, my dilemma with ranking AD carries is always, last year it was like double lifted to 10 and then everyone at a 7. Yeah. So it's like everyone else didn't matter, right? They're just there to do their job. And Altec has always been one of those carries that is there to do his job. But in a LCS where double lift is playing poorly, Sven is clearly at the top, and then this like lump of AD carries, to be able to pick up a guy who wasn't even on an academy team and like boot camped in Korea to restart his career, be like towards the top of that middle lump is actually pretty damn impressive.
Yeah, I mean, Altec was always one of those. I remember he came up roughly the same time as Pobelter, and they were always compared together. It was like, oh, these are the two. Like they were like similar age.
Yeah, they're the future.
Yeah, they're the future. And then Altec kind of never lived up to that hype, whereas like Pobelter arguably did or didn't, depending on who you talk to. But certainly Pobelter has had the more illustrious career of the two. Altec, I mean, I think his best split was probably still the one where FlyQuest made it to the 3rd, 4th place match in that one split. But this one right now, maybe if they keep winning and he keeps performing at the level, is this Altec's quote unquote breakout split? Is he?
Yeah,
you know,
it's weird.
It's interesting to watch. The team as a whole, though, like I talked about this a little bit as a style. Like it's not. I mean, it's not a style, right? They're just randomly they're just very good. And I was like, this is a team, and I'm kind of curious for your perspective on this. Is I think they're very good. When they can see like, oh shit, we can just go win the game. Like they're very good at understanding. Like at the end of the game, the most important, or at the end of the day, the most important objective is Nexus. And I feel like that escapes other teams sometimes. Like they just forget, like, hey, we just have to hit the Nexus.
Yeah, we just need to know what a win condition is and move towards that.
Other teams seem to be like, we actually, what we're gonna play for now is Baron. And they don't think about how Baron's just a means to an end, right? Like you don't getting Baron doesn't mean you win the game. It just makes it easier to win the game. And I feel like that's the difference between Immortals and say a CLG right now. Is CLG is very bad at understanding how to win the game. They just know like these are the things that you should be doing in order to get there. And it's like for Immortals, is this a thing like that they like? Is this a style? Is this a thing they can build upon, or are they just kind of lucking into these wins? Like what is it?
Yeah. So I think that the way I feel about this Immortals team is similar to the way I felt about Clutch in the spring of 2018. Both those players had Hakuho. which I realized when I was making this thought. I do think it is a way you can win a lot of games and you can kind of build towards it, but I don't think it's a way you win the split.
Yeah. Right?
They'll still need to find more reliable ways of generating advantages, but in terms of just being smart and identifying how you can win the game, even if it's a 20% chance and going hard for that, other teams aren't thinking about it the same way, so you'll win that way. So like every team in the ideal world can think this way and then also be amazing mechanically. It's just every individual has strengths and weaknesses. My, going into week 4 proclamation after watching, 6 Immortals games, is there's a chance they have a season just like Clutch did in the spring of 2018, where the whole year, everyone, all of us say, I don't really feel like this team is that good. Yeah. Then they win another game. And then you're going to be in quarterfinals and you'll be like, yeah, now's the test. And they'll upset someone.
Yeah.
But then, like, the moment will come where they just get obliterated. And I feel like that eventually happened to Clutch in the 3rd, 4th place match against Echo Fox, if you remember that. It was one of the fastest best of 5s we've had in LCS playoff history.
They got rolled.
Yeah, Dardoch just rolled them the whole game with his jungle Olaf. I kind of feel like that could be the journey for Immortals this year, where they're actually going to make playoffs. They might even upset someone, but I see no world where they win the split.
So what is the thing that rolls them? So you're saying that eventually you're going to hit that wall. What does that wall look like? Like, what does it take to consistently beat a team like this?
Yeah, it just takes a team that has actually figured out how to play. And a lot of teams in early split LCS haven't done that. So we saw C9 play against him. That game wasn't even close. And that's because C9 is already operating at that high level. If TL gets back to form, if TSM, continues on their upward trajectory, that's 3, and that would put a kind of Immortals at 4th, because it seems like Immortals right now is able to beat anyone who hasn't figured it out, because while they have their own kind of individual limitations, as a team, they're very whole.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it takes a team that has better mechanics, but also figured it out.
Do they have the building blocks to be a good team, though?
Okay, so this might be unfair because I'm literally just thinking about it at the sense. Like, you say building blocks to be a good team. Immortals is like one of those houses that get driven around on the oversized Lowe's trucks.
Oh.
Right? You can live in it right now, but it's never going to be this amazing thing.
Okay, hold on. You've never actually tried living in one of those, so I just want to give a shout out to anybody who might be living on one of these.
Oh, yeah.
That could be good.
I actually really want someday to have a mobile home that I just drive around in. It's actually really appealing.
I mean, I know.
I just need a box. I need, once mobile internet gets really good, that's a way higher chance.
I mean, Brian on my team lives in a van right in our parking lot, so there is a future. People are doing the van living thing already. So I mean, it's easy for him. I think he just plays games here and then he just goes in the parking lot. So we always crack jokes about him.
Are you outing him? Is he allowed to do this?
No. He's gotten confirmation from people. Cool. It's cool. It's cool.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So, what do you think about Immortals?
I love them, honestly. I love watching teams like this that make as a viewer. I think I mentioned here, if I was a coach, I would hate them. There's too much going on that's difficult. But as a viewer, I think it's such a fun experience, because when you're watching an Immortals game, they could be down 10,000 gold.
Yeah. And
suddenly they might go win the game. And it kind of reminds me of those old Cloud9. Those when High was on Cloud9 and they were at international events. And there were games where, even domestically, there'd be games where they'd be down a lot and then suddenly something would happen and they would go win the game. And I think that is a really valuable thing that's it's almost not teachable. How as a coach, how do you sit down and be like, all right, you guys, you gotta be better at looking at for angles in which we can just go win the game. That's not something that's teachable.
You can't even in the review, why didn't you see this angle? It's dude, because I was...
I mean, most people don't see, even in reviews, coaches do not see these angles. We don't see these angles, and I think it just takes a special kind of player to be able to see it. And SOAS has been one of those high-like players where they are very good at just being okay, this is the thing that's going to give us the most value at the moment. And they might not be I don't know if he sat, I don't know if he even made the call, but he might not have, let's say SOAS made that call. I don't think he sat there and was necessarily oh, we're going to win the game off of this.
Yeah.
But he probably saw, oh, this is going to give us a lot of value if we do this right now. This is the most pressure we can apply to the map in this particular moment. And I think that's a really fun thing to watch. And I do think if you have that fundamental down, the other stuff is much easier to teach. You can teach Immortals, hey, this is how you play for mid prio and like Rift Herald prio in the mid game. This is how we can set up around Dragon better. This is like maybe Eika, you need to be roaming a bit more. These are things I think you can teach. You can't teach how to like
that game sense.
The game sense thing. And I think that's a really like to me that is a really important building block. I don't know if it's enough. Like I don't think they have enough to like become like a world class necessarily, but I do think I would like it's like not a bad position to be in if you're trying to build a winner.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question here because we've kind of switched up the format of this podcast. Yes. Throughout your 10 thoughts like writing process, you've given a blurb on each team, but which one are you most excited to talk about that we haven't covered? Like, I'm sure as you're writing, you're like, oh yeah, I got this really good banger here, or I really, really wanted to make a point about this team, because I want to make sure we hit that conversation before we wrap up on this one. What, do you have one now? Because I can just keep talking. I got something else.
It was definitely Immortals, but I'm going to let you keep talking for a second.
Yeah, so you mentioned something about Froggen and Vel'Koz.
Yes.
And I actually have to credit I will dominate for this because he mentioned it when he was watching one of the Froggen games. But Froggen is able to play Vel'Koz and champions like that, even though you mentioned that they lost on here, because of like his understanding of angles on the map. And the fight in particular to point out was actually in their TSM loss. But do you remember the Vel'Koz fight where he ulted Kabe over the wall?
Over the wall and just killed him.
Yeah, it was really interesting because the place where Froggen moved after he got pushed out of River is like, I don't see other players move like that because they don't realize they can reach and impact the River fight from that spot. But Froggen like really hugged the wall so he'd be in range for that ultimate. And I feel like that's just something that comes from a decade of Anivia. Like it's ingrained in him. But that's another one of those things that like a lot of coaches wouldn't even be able to necessarily point out in a review if like you don't do it. But when you do it, you get to notice it.
Yeah, I mean, he's extremely good on Vel'Koz, and like I don't want to take that away from him. I'm kind of like, I guess my point when bringing it up is it doesn't matter that he's good on Vel'Koz. Like who cares if you're good on Vel'Koz if that's not leading to victories? And you were one person that was very high on the Dignitas hype train.
Oh, yeah, it's the curse of talking every week.
They're 0-3 since their start. So it's like win 3, lose 3. Is this team any good?
Yep. I think they're still a playoff team. I think their schedule got really hard.
Yeah.
They did C9. They played TSM in week 3, which I think was much better than week 1 or 2 TSM. And then they did have that one bad loss to FlyQuest. But to me, that still puts them kind of middle of the pack. And going up against 100 Thieves and Golden Guardians this week, I think they'll bounce back with a 2-0. That's my quick take.
So I think that's a fair assessment. Like I agree that they're still a playoff team. My question to you though is, I don't think this is a team that's content with just being, like they have players that want more than, hey, we made playoffs.
Yes, they want a title again.
How like when you look at a team that's like middle of the pack like this, and I think this is a very decidedly middle of the pack team with higher aspirations than middle of the pack. How do you actually transform into a team that can actually contend?
It's a good question. This team is running into the roadblocks that we had kind of laid out before the season, where we said, how is Froggen and Huni going to work together the best? And it was working in week 1 and 2, and it didn't necessarily work in week 3. Maybe that was because of Froggen's Vel'Koz. They're playing a little bit too slow right now with the way they're setting up. It's about staying positive and getting reps, like in that sense of how do you improve. I don't necessarily have like the immediate diagnosis of, all Huni has to do is stop dying in lane. But play faster and keep working. That's kind of all I'd say. They've only lost to the top teams once, right? Like in their mind, if they have that mindset of learning something after every loss, then it'll be fine. But if it's one of those like they expected immediate success, then it's going to hurt.
Yeah. I mean, I guess they could still 15-3, and maybe they could be the top team. Always that future. Maybe Froggen just plays Vel'Koz.
Maybe 12-6.
12 times in a row and proves me wrong. That could be good.
Goes 12-0. Forces bans on it.
So the one team I did want to talk about that we haven't quite really talked much on is TSM.
Ooh, okay.
And so my thing is, I'm looking at them, and I feel like here's a team where it has actually gotten better week over week over week. And Bjergsen's talking about how he's still been sick. And so as he gets better, maybe that translates to his play as well. They have a match against Cloud9 coming up. Yeah. And they're on a 4-game win streak. Cloud9's on a 6-game win streak.
Yeah.
If TSM wins this year, are you ready to call them the new best team in the league?
Ooh, no. I'll call them second best.
Yeah.
I'd still actually, it depends on the way they win.
The way they win, yeah.
Like if they just completely steamroll C9, then I'd be like, hey, maybe this TSM team's really the best.
Yeah.
But if they win like a close game, then I'd still say C9's body of work is much higher. That game can buy TSM so much credibility.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
like, they've sucked, honestly, like, relative to how you expect them to be the last 2 years at this point. Like, you know, they made finals in spring last year, but they didn't win. Like, TSM fans expect, hey, you guys gotta, like, we expect the best, and it's been years. They got so accustomed to winning, and they haven't really been able to win lately. This is going to be a really big regular season game for them, which is kind of a weird thing to say for a team like TSM.
Yeah.
But if they win here, like, to me, I was like, this might be the best win they've had in 3 years.
Yeah. There's definitely, this is going a little bit more high level, but I really like it when teams can create high pressure regular season moments. Because there's obviously the concern about burnout and you don't want to go too hard too fast because then you're not going to peak in the playoffs. But the more you can recreate a high-pressure environment, the better you're going to be able to perform in the truly high-pressure environments.
Yep.
So, yeah, TSM and C9 are going to get up for this game, and I'm really excited for it. I still think C9 will take it.
I do too.
It'll be hard to find a person that can make a like solid, cogent argument to like, yeah, TSM will definitely win this one. But you'll definitely find some people to be like, yeah, I think they can do it.
Here's my argument for how TSM is going to win.
Okay.
And Nisqy talked about this as well. He said that he struggled in the past in like higher stake games against Jensen. And so here's the thing is I don't think Nisqy is as good as his record at the moment. I think he can be potentially, and I think he brings a lot to the table. But I think just a straight up 1v1 in mid lane, I think Bjergsen's going to be better. And I feel like the way C9 can lose is if they lose mid prio where Nisqy isn't able to roam to the side, I think that's going to create a lot of issues for them. And I think that's how TSM loves doing like that, like 7-minute blue buff invade. They love like pressuring you from their mid and jungle. And I feel like maybe this is the one way to attack C9 is to pressure their mid lane. And I think if you can remove that mid prio, that frees up the side lanes to potentially, you know, like you know, I'm not like I think it's gonna be tough side lanes for TSM either, but I think that's the one way they can win is if Bjergsen can have like a strong game. Yeah,
I agree, but I described it a different way when I was trying to do TSM win conditions. I basically said, hey, C9 hasn't played at all from behind. They're not even getting reps from behind because from what I hear, they're also dominating everyone everywhere.
Yeah, always winning.
And Dardoch has had some of the best early games of all junglers. So if Dardoch can slow or shut down Blaber early, what happens?
Yeah.
Right? That's the biggest thing. And obviously, if Dardoch has shut down Blaber, Nisqy's not roaming well, and they actually have the mid lane priority that you just talked about.
Yep.
But I think it would more likely start with Dardoch rather than start with Bjergsen.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my thought.
Makes a lot of sense.
I'm excited.
Yeah, it should be fun.
Any final thoughts, Kien, before we wrap up our preview of Week 4?
Final thoughts. Because we did start the show at the Oscar, I would like to give a shout out to the movie Parasite. If you have not had an opportunity, have you seen this movie?
I actually haven't, and I have said I'm going to see it for like the past month.
Yeah, well, this is your opportunity now.
Every time, and I obviously have like this shrunken view on everything through the people I follow on Twitter.
Yeah.
But like, it wasn't just when this won Best Picture that my timeline popped off.
Yeah.
Throughout the last several months, everyone's like, wow, Parasite, such an amazing movie. And I'm like, oh, and every time I'm like, oh, I'm going to check that out.
Yeah.
And I never do, but keep going.
So this is to both you and to anybody who's tuning in who has not had the opportunity to watch Parasite. I think it's a phenomenal movie. If you don't know anything about it, please don't spoil it. Like, I wouldn't even read a synopsis.
Yeah, where's the best place to watch it?
I mean, I watched it in a movie theater. My friend downloaded it.
We're in LA, so it's still showing in some theaters, but you can get it on like, it's actually, you can purchase it for stream, right?
I have no idea. I haven't looked it up.
We're terrible at plugging.
Wherever you can watch it, make sure you get out there and support the movie. I think.
Yeah, it says you can get it on YouTube and Amazon Prime and stuff.
Oh, perfect. So it's super easy. You know, just throw some bucks at it.
Yeah,
I think
$6.
Well deserved. Oscar. It's been one of my favorite movies in the last couple of years. So
yeah,
go out there, check out the movie.
All right, thanks. A movie review. We're going to sneak more of this stuff in there over time. Just movie and basketball.
Just slowly. This is going to become a podcast about something else entirely.
Shout out to the Milwaukee Bucks for being such a solid basketball team. The Toronto Raptors as well.
I feel like we could have a full conversation about, because I was talking to my friend recently about, he was
15-game Toronto Raptor win streak.
It's good, but I was saying that the Bucks are going to win I said the Bucks are
title.
going to win the title. Like,
Yeah.
and I think they're by far the favorite, and he thought I was crazy. And we can have a full conversation about this.
Okay, if you're a League of Legends watcher, we're just going to talk about the Bucks for 5 minutes. But for now, why? I think they're very good.
Yeah.
But what makes you peg them as the favorite?
I don't think anybody can stop Giannis. I mean,
The Raptors stopped him last year with Ibaka and Gasol, and they still have both those guys.
yeah, but I think the Raptors last year also had Kawhi. Which,
That was a big difference.
yeah, and that's kind of a huge like. I mean, that's a big
Yeah.
difference, right? Like it's not just Giannis. He has a lot of players around him. Like Middleton's
Yeah.
been having a really phenomenal year. I think I just saw he was shooting 50, 40, 90,
Mhm.
and I'm going on 20 a game. It's just like they
Yeah.
have a lot of size and pieces, and they just I feel like every time I watch Giannis, it's just like when I'm in the playoffs, I look for the best player.
Yeah.
And I feel like, and this was LeBron for years,
Yeah.
was who has the best player that can just turn it on
Mhm.
another notch. And I feel like nobody can be able to match him this year.
I mean, it doesn't seem like it with the way that they just totally dominate. The big wrinkle that would because he took that loss really hard to the Raptors, and that's why he's shooting so many threes this year.
yeah, and I love seeing that.
Maybe he's just a year. Like my fear would be Giannis is a year away from turning it on because he can shoot those threes in the regular season, but in high pressure situations, I don't think that shot's going to fall.
I think it's interesting. I think that's a potentially a good point. And I think we'll see when the playoffs come. And the other storyline, and I think this is maybe a more somber, like sad way of thinking about it, is he had a very close relationship with Kobe, who had, like, as you hopefully know at this point, passed away recently. And I feel like that's going to be like the extra level. Like, I just want the Bucks Lakers final because I think there's like a I think that's just going to create like the most impactful storylines, the most impactful. Like, it's going to be really emotional to watch that. And I, like, as a big NBA fan, I think that's part of me saying the Bucks is because I want that final to happen. So there's like that level of bias that plays into it.
There was so much hype for their first regular season meeting, and like you can tell that the ESPN and ABC, everyone is just trying to push this like, passing the torch, like from LeBron to Giannis, the best player. Like they said it when he just like dunked. It's like, well, yeah, one of 12 dunks a game for Giannis. It's not a passing the torch moment, but in a sense, like there is something cool there. And I mean, I'm a Laker fan, so I'm on board. I'll take a finals appearance for the Lakers.
I mean, people give you all shit all the time, like when you're casting for having like these weird catchphrases or something, or like, oh, you guys are just harping on the same thing. I'm like, do you guys not watch sports broadcasts? Like, because you guys are so much more diverse.
Hand down, man down.
Yeah, there's just so many. Like, they come up like it's not. I don't even know if it's a bad thing. I think having these catchphrases is actually like has been good. Like, there's like bang.
Those are sweet.
There's all like people have come up with like phrases, and sometimes it bothers people, but it's funny to me to see people complain about things. I'm like, wow, you have just actually never watched a sports broadcast. Not that we should be like a sports broadcast necessarily, but I think it's just funny to think about like viewing experience and like the things people will criticize the cast for. I'm just sitting here, I was like, man, I've been watching.
You're like so numb to it.
Yeah, and I'm just sitting here, I was like, man, I like grew up watching like freaking Phil Simms on CBS. Like, there's like, with all due respect to Phil, there are other. Like, you guys bring entertainment. I just want to give a shout out to the casting team for that.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say is there's a lot of crossover between the NBA and the League of Legends subreddit.
Yeah, and
they share memes every once in a while when I'm browsing both. There's like a bunch of people, like COG will randomly get flamed in like an NBA postgame thread. I'm like, where is this coming from?
It's really funny.
It's sweet. Anyway, that'll do it for episode. What did I say? 12?
This is 12.
Oh, thank you for that. It's like, what episode am I listening to?
13 is an unlucky number.
Yeah, maybe I'll just skip it like they do on hotel elevators.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, I think that's silly. Floor 14 knows where they really are. But that'll do it for this episode. Thanks, Kien, and thanks everyone else for listening.
Thanks, Jatt.